I don't.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Excited to have you again this week. We are doing some cool things in the community. So if you're looking for something different to be connected to a group of guys that, hard charging Christians and growing in their faith, or guys that have been around the block a few times that have seen a few things that can share advice and help out, jump into the Journey of a Christian Dad on Facebook in that group. We're getting ready to start a new community off of that also to help you guys achieve your goals, grow your family, grow yourself, hit your hit whatever it is that's holding you back and break through some different levels. But uh we're excited with this podcast that we get to do things like talk about guy stuff, be masculine, uh understand that it's good to be a guy. It's good to be a dad. It's good to have the responsibility to be a leader in your family. It's good to plug in, take action, and go. And I'm really excited for the guest that we have today. Uh, Marines, police officer, canine dog, German Shepherd, bullets, crime and criminals, and a lot of manly stuff we're going to talk about today. So uh, we've got Mark Tappan with us today. He's been on A&E. He's the top dog champion. Uh, his dog Mattis, most decorated police dog down in the Alpharetta uh, community there. He's got over 5 million followers on TikTok and just a social media sensation. He's got TV time all over the place. He's got a book out. It's just went on the shelf at Target the other day. It's like super cool to see someone in law enforcement and then take that and do something wonderful with it and also glorify God. So, like in your book, anyway, we're jumping ahead here, but Mark, welcome to the Journey of a Christian Dad podcast.
Thank you so much. I think it's awesome. You're listening to all these manly things, and then you got to TikTok and probably lost the audience. They're like, "What? Wait, that's not at all."
So
But yeah, that'd be
something really cool about that is, I know all the kids got the tickety talk and all that type thing.
great.
And you've got two different sort of platforms. You've got a big kid book for us guys. And
Yes.
then you've also got some kids books that have been incredibly successful. And it's nice to know at the heart of it, there's a guy with a Christian heart who lives his life that way behind the messaging that are in those books. So that's something I do when I look for entertainment or look for things to bring into the household. If I can find out the heart of the person that was created it,
Hmm.
I get to interview the Kendrick brothers a while back. It hasn't been released yet, but their movies, like it's awesome and it's great and totally cool. However, I don't know those guys and I
Yeah.
don't know what their heart is. It seems like what their heart is. However, they could be all in it for the dollars and could be these selfish guys and could be, greedy corporate people and blah, blah, blah. And then I met them and I'm like, you guys are the greatest.
That's all. I love it.
Super humble. And so it just gives you a really good feel that you're not going to get duped into something or tricked into something or have a devil's lie slipped in. Always be watchful for things like that. However, when you know the heart of a person that's the creator, like, okay,
Hmm.
we're going to go down the right path on this one, and this one is a much safer avenue than some other content that families consume. So, uh, you so anyway, so that's what I love is you got an adult content, and also things that 4, 5, 6, 7 year olds just eat up.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, we may have lost a few of the guys on the TikTok, but welcome back, welcome back. We've got to be aware of this stuff of how our kids consume uh,
Absolutely.
information. So
Well, and that's I don't know if this is jumping ahead or not, but that was kind of the. I've heard so many people say that social media is evil, and it's like, well, it's a world that our kids that everyone is playing in. So why not put a light in that content, right? And just be true and glorify God, in everything that we do, because we're supposed to be in the world, not of the world. And so that's kind of the goal with all of my platforms is to be a light wherever I'm at.
yes, yeah, absolutely, 100%. I talk about being a light all the time, and often before we record the podcast, we pray and whether the guest says it or I say it, but we always talk about being the light so others get attracted to it so that we can share and glorify God and help others grow a relationship closer to Christ. Because that's, as Christians, that's truly what we're here for. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
live for Christ and help others live for Christ and be connected to Him. Um, so you were a Marine. So tell us what you did in the Marines.
I think while you're chuckling, is I described it as a bullet catcher, right? I was a 0311 grunt infantry. So it's just basic as you get, one job.
So I was military as well. We worked on flight lines and handled transportation, and so we were involved. We weren't security, I guess we were backup security. So we had security forces, and we did have military dogs with us and drug sniffing dogs, and so we were very much around security all the time. And of course, we did have machine guns with bullets, and so if needed, we were trained to take care of that stuff. Um,
And you came out with a skill, which I only
yes,
had
yes, yes.
skill that I came out with.
So we were going through training, and we actually trained with Marines in a class, and the army score on average, we didn't do any homework. We were like 90%, and they did homework every night for at least an hour,
Uh-huh.
and they scored like 78%. Like, and I was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" And they're like, "Well, it was either this or be a grunt."
Here's the grunt.
And yeah, so the guys that did that, I'm like, that is the muck. That is the job that, holy cow. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, they get all the glory and everything, but the Marine grunts, man, you guys had it tough.
Yeah, so the nickname we were given at the Battle of Belleau Wood was Tufel Hunden, which means devil dog. And the reason that we got that was just that the Germans they kept killing Marines, and they just kept coming. Like they're possessed. They won't stop. So it's just really a low bar. It's just like, man, they're driven and keep coming no matter what. So yeah.
This is a terrible story, but I was at a Coast Guard recruiting office for some reason. I wasn't ever looking to go Coast Guard, and the guy answers the phone. He says, "Hold on a second." Answers the phone, and there's a lady's voice on it. "How'd my son score? How'd he do? Did he get in?" And he says, "Ma'am, I have got great news for you. Your son scored a 32, and that is fantastic." And she says, "No, that is terrible. He needs a 50 to be in the Coast Guard." And he says, "Ma'am, here's why this is great news. He scored a 32, which is the minimum score to get into the Marines. Your son can be a Marine."
Yep.
Oh, that is good news.
Yep. And somehow I wrote a book. Makes no
Yeah.
sense. Like I don't get it.
So speaking of your book, holy cow, that opening chapter in your book is incredible.
No, thanks. Yeah. I wanted to it's one I definitely wanted to hook people with the opening, but it's also kind of the one call that defined where Mattis, my dog, where his career would go. So that's why it starts off kind of fast paced and hopefully a cool story, but and it has a happy ending. So it's one of those that it kind of leaves you on the edge. But just so you know, if you go on my social media and stuff, Mattis, he's laying right beside me right now. So he's still, but it does kind of leave you on a cliffhanger to start off with.
Yes, absolutely. Read that and I'm like, wait, it seems like it's missing something, although it seems like I know the end, or at
Yes.
least where we are now. Like
Yeah.
I think everything's fine, but yeah, that was definitely a cliffhanger. Can you share just a little bit of the opening chapter, whatever you think the
Yeah.
audience might like?
Yeah. It was like I said, we got a lot of notoriety out of it. And it was such a struggle too. And I think I closed the chapter with that. And I kind of opened when I finally get back to it, which is chapter 7, with the struggle that it created in me, because I really thought I messed up. Like I still to this day, it's something that
I
my
saw
dog,
those questions in there where
yeah,
put out the questions that were running through your head, which we can talk about in a bit. But yeah, feel free,
yeah.
continue.
So it was one where I was hungry, and it was time to eat when I started shift because I worked evening watch, which was my favorite. I loved it, working 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And right after I get out of roll call, which we go and get our assignments and stuff, I go and get something to eat, if calls permitted. And so I was headed to my favorite place that had lamb heroes, and I was driving, and this car like cut abruptly in front of me. It made a weird lane change, so it caught my attention, and I start running the
And you're
tag.
and you're and you're where you're driving a regular, I don't think it was a Suburban, but a big old beast of a vehicle,
Tahoe. Yep.
clearly marked.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yep.
crazy when people do something crazy
Well,
when
that's
you
why it
can.
stood out, because most of the time when people drive around me, it kind of gets frustrating because people drive like 5 miles under the speed limit, and I'm like, man, I just want to go get my Lamb Hero. That's all I want. Like it would have taken a lot for me to activate my lights. And so this guy, he made this lane change, and I was like, man, that was kind of weird. It kind of made the hairs stick up a little bit. So I ran the tag. It came back to a rental, and kind of arose some suspicion, but at the same time, it means that insurance is valid, tags are valid, and I have no information on the driver. So that's fine. And I was like, okay, I'm not worried about that lane change. But then he busts through a red light, like right in front of me. And I'm like, okay, the lane change was because he saw me at last second. And so he's trying to get away from me. And then he might have seen me running the tag, on my computer looking down, and then took off through the red light. And I'm like, there's something going on, but I still don't know what it is. So I activate my emergency equipment and try to get in behind this car, and he's taken off. There's heavy traffic, and all I have is traffic charges. And we always have to weigh the safety of the public versus the necessity to apprehend someone. And the only reason that I had to go after him was just because he ran a red light, and that's it. So I'm like, it's not really that safe, and it's time for a Lamb Hero. So I'm canceling my. He busts a U-turn and starts coming right back towards me, and I'm like, wow, this guy is not very good at evading the police. And so I get in behind him again, but still traffic was thick. So I saw him jump on the freeway, and I headed that way, but I had my lights shut off, and I was just kind of watching where he went to see if I could see anything. And I saw him get on the freeway, and I get on the freeway, and he's just flying. So I lose him again, told him I canceled, but I gave out the description of the car, and he got off at the next exit and flew into a parking lot and wrecked his car out. It was kind of like a leveled parking lot, and he was on the top level, and he went over the edge of the level where he was just kind of teetering on the edge. So the car was now worthless. Both people that were in the car jump out, start running. One starts headed one way, one the other way, and I start heading towards the one that I kind of knew the area really well, where he was running towards. It was the strip mall, and on one side you had the strip mall, on the other side there was a creek, and there's a retaining wall that went down to the creek. And so I go to the far end of where he would be coming from to cut him off, and I pull into the parking lot. I jump out. I hit a button that I have on my belt that flings my dog's Mattis, his door open, and he's supposed to run by my side. And so the door's popping open, and as it is, I'm running forward. Mattis starts running by my side. I see the guy directly in front of me coming from behind the strip mall. So he's got a brick wall on one side, the retaining wall on the other, and he hops over the retaining wall. And in places, the retaining wall is about 10 feet high, and that's what I kind of thought. And so I run right where he was, and I jump over the retaining wall, and I see that he's still falling. And I'm like, oh my. So I grab on, ripping skin off my hand, but holding onto the guardrail. And then I see Mattis leap over my left side and start falling. And it's an image that's burned into my mind. I'll never forget, because it was the first time I saw fear in my dog. And he's hunched over and he looks back at me like, what am I supposed to do, Dad? And
Oh,
yeah, I couldn't stop him. I didn't have him on leash. He was jumping. He was doing what he was supposed to do. He was running by my side, lands on the guy, and looks up at me. And I'm like, okay, maybe he's okay. And so I tell my dog, guard him. And I tell the guy, you move, you're going to get bit by that dog. And so he doesn't move. Mattis guards him. Eventually we get down to him. I check my dog out. He seems like he's okay. The other officers that were chasing the other guy call us up and say, hey, we got this guy. Can you get your partner over here? And so I grab Mattis. We run back to our Tahoe, jump in the car, go across the street. He jumps out, runs by my side. We're passing all these other police officers. Mattis is pulling me. The guy sees the dog and gives up. And then my dog, Mattis, just
Mm.
collapse, and starts whimpering. And so I go and I pick him up and I throw him in the car and we start rushing to the vet. And that's where all the questions started entering my head because it was like I knew it was bad. Um, I I I thought I made a mistake because it was one of those that I had him running by my side. Sometimes I didn't think I had time to put a leash on him, and he's such a good dog where he will stay right by my side. But I had put him in this predicament where he had trusted me, and he got hurt because of it, and I was worried. A, he might die. B, if he survives, he might never be a police dog again because of just the fear and the PTSD from the incident. Um, so yeah, I had all these questions, and what you don't understand is, and hopefully as you read through the book, you see this bond that we build. Being a canine handler, you're with that dog more than any person on the planet. It's 24/7. The dog goes home with you. He goes to work with you. I believe in a very social dog, that he is, not just a tool, but he can go anywhere with me. And so having that get hurt like that was an immense burden, on me, and that was a rough night. I had to go back with him into the vet's office, pick him up, put him on the X-ray table. They ran some tests, and the vet said we need to get him into surgery right away.
Oh
And
my
so that
gosh.
was, yeah, that's not the words that you want to hear. And so that was a tumultuous night, lots of praying, lots of wrestling. The greatest thing, and I'm going to give this away, but the greatest thing was my department actually put something out on social media, and so all these people praying for Mattis, like thousands upon thousands. By the time they got him opened up, he had a lacerated liver, and so he was bleeding internally. By the time they had him opened up, it had completely healed itself, which is
Oh
miraculous.
my gosh.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So, um, I got to see the power of prayer, and that's how the book starts. But it kind of also gives you a glimpse of how I see the world, and it's how God has taught me through my dog, right? And I see the power of prayer in that, or I see the tenacity in which he approaches life and how he trusts and his work ethic. He's just there were so many things in my dog's life, and that's why I thought it was important to write the book. Was that it made me want to be a better man, a better husband, a better father, is just because of the way that this dog approached his life. If I could take some of that and apply it in my life, like I see so many godly qualities in a dog. But that's what Romans 13 says, right? Is that men are without excuse because of creation. And this is an amazing creation of God. And I'm seeing, his glory manifested in a dog.
Mm, that is awesome. So we totally omitted the book title. So it's a
Yeah.
dog named Mattis is the book title, and the subtitle is 12 Lessons for Living Courageously, Serving Selflessly, and Building Bridges from from a Heroic Canine Officer. It's a mouthful to say. Um, and something I love about it is the stories, are right there, super engaging. Um, and then, that first chapter, it, the title is Go All In, and
Mhm.
right underneath it it says Colossians 3:23. And
Yeah.
this is one of my favorite verses of all time. I've
Me
got a bunch of favorite verses, but this is one that I think challenges us as Christians,
too. Hmm.
something that some Christians do, a lot of Christians do or don't do. So
Hmm.
what and that verse is whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. You may have heard me get a little choked up about that, but when you think about working for God, when God's your boss, when you're doing this
Hmm.
for the glory of God, man, is that a whole different thing than working for man? Like
Yeah.
this task that I'm doing, however mundane it is or whatever it is, we're living our life for God. And that verse says, hey, this thing that you're doing begrudgingly, this thing that you're not really
Hmm.
paying attention to, this thing that you're sloughing off. And reminds me when I was a kid being around my dad or being around sports and the coach say, practice makes perfect. And,
Hmm.
how you do this is how you do everything. And, be focused and, work towards perfection and just things like that. And I'm like, huh, those are kind of ways of the world type things. However, here's the Bible verse that says,
Yeah.
yes, and
Right.
glorify God.
Yep.
God's directing the steps. So follow through.
Yep. I remember I was, and I've been taught over and over. My mom was a big influence, right? She always just do everything, but she didn't have for the glory of God. I remember when I was a youth pastor, so I had a stint. I was a,
Dude, this is the craziest thing. Youth
yeah,
pastor, Marine.
well, Marine youth pastor, police officer. But I was setting up chairs for youth group. The stackable
Yes.
chairs like every youth group has, and I had a million things because I had games, I had to preach, I had to do all these things, and I'm setting up chairs, and it was the last thing I wanted to do. And so the senior pastor comes through and he's like, "Oh, what you doing?" And just setting up chairs. And he must have looked at the way that I was setting up chairs or just throwing them out or whatever. And he hit me with that verse. Whatever you do, do it for the Lord, not for men. And I'm like, wow. And ever since then, it was one of those that the chairs had to be perfect. He's like, think of it like Jesus is coming to youth group tonight. How would you want those chairs to look? And I'm like, yeah, okay. All right. And then trying to approach everything in life. Because that's, like you said, one of the most mundane tasks, setting up plastic chairs, right? And the kids they get in them, they're dumping soda and pizza all over them. They're flipping them around. They're breaking them because they're like goofing around in them. But hey, what if Jesus came tonight? Because he is. He is. And so that was one of the best lessons. But then I saw it again in my dog. So it's one of those recurring themes that I see over and over in my life. And one of my favorite verses too, because of that.
Yeah, another one of my favorite verses is right behind you for those on video. For me and my house,
Yeah.
we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:14 or
Yes.
24:15. And I've got that at my house above my front door as well. And I'm like, that one brings me to tears also when I think about just the like majesty of that uh verse. Like, you know, uh, when you think about just things that you do in your house with your family.
Yep.
Um, yeah, last night we were on our way to the baseball game, me and my daughter, and something happened yesterday. I don't know what it was. I missed it completely, but all of my neighbor, well, not all, but a lot of my neighbors took pictures on social media. There was a cloud in the sky, one cloud, and it had a rainbow in the cloud.
Oh, nice.
There was no rainbow,
Yeah.
but this cloud had so many colors and it was so vivid and was
Yeah.
almost like a Indian feather or something like crazy. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, where are these people? And then I started noticing it was people around. I'm like, I was home at this exact time. I was working, had my head down, and I could have seen this majesty from God, and all my neighbors are, commenting about it and stuff like that. So I showed that to my daughter on the way down. I said, "Hey, check this out." And she was, "Dad, what is this? Where was this? What time was this?" And she got totally in it, and we had a short conversation about God. And I'm like, so when you're looking for things and
Yes.
appreciating things and recognizing where it comes from, and others in our lives might not be in tune. Hey,
Right.
what'd you think about that? How'd that happen? And starts a conversation. So if you guys are looking for simple opportunities, can be things that happen on a pretty regular basis that are different, unusual, unexplained.
Yeah. And not to hijack it towards my book, but
No,
that's
no,
one of
no.
the
Please do. Please do. Cause
right. That's one of the goals of the book is like I'm seeing this in my dog, but I really hope that people are able to do exactly what you're talking about. Because it's all around us and in everyone's life are these amazing things that happen, whether it's a rainbow in a cloud, or it's simply how the body heals itself, right? You cut yourself and your skin cells replace. Like this is it. We have a self-repairing body, or the mechanics of the eye, or you get deep into the like. There's this majesty that we are surrounded by, and that's what I wanted the book to communicate. Is like I want people to be able to see their world with the same filter that I see my world.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've got medical professionals
Yes.
saying, I don't got it. This didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
However, I saw this and then I
Yeah.
saw this.
Yeah.
Like, never seen this one before. Our books that we study for years don't have this one in it. Like,
Right.
we'd love to produce this result ourselves,
Hmm.
but as humans, we can't.
Right.
And then the non-believers out there, it's like, hey, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. Over millions of years, it happened.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We where we live out in Lake St. Louis, Missouri, and there's a lake out here called Lake St. Louis, and one kid fell through, and I forget how long he was under 20 minutes or like a long time, and broke through the ice. And they, tried to save him, and the doctor refused to quit, and he came back to life, and he's alive today. And they made a movie about it called Breakthrough.
Uh-huh.
And talking to the people that were there and around, they're like, we can't explain this. The
Right.
doctor, buddy of mine was talking to the doctor in person the other day, and he says, hey, can you? And the guy, to this day, like 10 years later, whatever it is couldn't talk about it. Like he got emotional and just, and
Yeah.
he's like, I wasn't being a jerk. Like I was, and this guy just went from being a regular conversational guy to completely shut down and
Wow.
visibly sort of trembling. Like
Hmm.
he's a medical doctor. This kid was dead, and he had him for like 45 minutes on the table, and then all of a sudden he was back.
Unreal.
And the guy, at least talking to my friend, wouldn't engage that conversation at all.
Right. And you just wonder like how his brain wraps around that, and what God's doing in his life to, yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So my friend didn't have any insight as to whether this guy was Christian, not, any of that, but he's like, he was clearly twisted.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, having those different lessons and the stories, and you can just tie it right back to Bible verses. And this is a simple way. So like when parents think, how can I lead my kids?
Hmm.
There's these conversations about Christ and the Bible and leading them to heaven and everything. Here's a simple way. Open the book.
Yeah.
Hey, kids, I saw this story about a dog and oh yeah, tell me more. Oh, I know that guy. I watch him on TikTok.
It all comes together. That's
Dude, you're the coolest dad in the world. You're reading a book by the guy that's on TikTok?
yeah. Yeah.
Totally serious, And then they're like, "Oh yeah, he's got a kid's book out. You want me to get that for you? Yeah, get that for me, Dad. Like I totally want to read that. I've been wanting that book for years, Dad." So I think that's like a super simple way to do it is find something the kids find interesting and
Yeah.
then bring something additional to it. Doesn't have to be a 30-minute lecture or sermon.
Right. No, absolutely not. Yeah, and that's the thing of what I always saw with dogs, right? Is because who would be interested in a short, bald guy, you know, um, especially on TikTok, right? How in the world? But dogs create this incredible bridge between people, and so it's a
100%.
great avenue to be able to share the heart of why I do what I do. And especially in a time in our nation where there's such a great chasm between citizens and police. So, and then when you work in too, that man, I love Jesus, and the fact that a dog can create a bridge to be able to talk about that is pretty amazing.
That is pretty amazing. What was the spark or what was the point which you go, maybe I'll try this? Because like you probably weren't a social media master or anything prior to
Right.
this.
No, it was getting in. It was I was at a demonstration once, and I was on SWAT, and we had all this cool stuff out. We had this gear, sniper rifles, grenade launchers, body armor, robots. And we were telling stories, and right next to us was the canine guy, and he was late. And so we had this humongous crowd. The second the dog showed up, and he did a couple tricks, and even the canine handler wasn't necessarily the best in the world. And he just had his dog like sit, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's amazing!" You know, I was just telling you about like robots. What, like, why I can sit? Watch me, I can sit. But just I saw, and it wasn't a jealousy thing. It was like, what an incredible avenue. And I love dogs, and I ended up getting into canine, and so that was like when the click went on, that if I get into canine, I need to make sure that, is always passionate about bringing the community and police together. It's one of the things that if you don't have buy-in from the community, then they don't trust the police. And that's what we've been experiencing. And so it's always been a focus of mine is like, okay, well, let's come together and get that buy-in. And so when I saw that and I got into canine, I'm like, we need to make sure that that's an emphasis on what we do, right? It's not just that we're really good at training, we're really good at deployments, but we have to be really good at community relations because the dogs do such a good job of creating the avenue for it. And so that was where it came from. And I knew I was on, I wanted to be on Facebook, right? Because that's what that's what we do is Facebook. And that's what I
Right.
knew. And so I went to the department and I was like, hey, can we start a Facebook page for the dogs? I think it would really catch on. And we'd be able to engage with the community. And they're like, no, the department has one of those. Why don't you try Instagram? I'm like, what's I knew my oldest daughter was on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, anything that you give me, I'm gonna take. So I went to my oldest daughter, and I'm like, hey, what do I do? And so kind of showed me, and it took off, right? I think 1,000 turned into 20,000, turned into 60,000. Now we're at close to 300,000. So it was just showing pictures of my dog and telling stories from his perspective.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that is totally engaging. Like almost everybody I know is like crazy over dogs. My daughter stops what she's doing when she sees anybody's dog and runs over there and stops about 6 feet short and says, "Can I pet your dog?"
I love it.
And 99% of the time they're like, "Absolutely." And then the 1% of the time, like, "Well, I would say yes, except this dog."
Yeah. Speaking of dogs, I left one outside, so I got to let her in. All
Oh,
right.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely let her in. So something you said, kind of community relations and everything was something that I wanted to bring to the dads on the podcast, which is, and get your insight on this from the law enforcement perspective. But as I was in my younger adult ages, I was and still really good friends with a guy named Don. He was a canine officer for years and years and years, had, unfortunately multiple dogs because, dogs have a shorter lifespan than we do.
Yeah.
Um, and in hanging out with him, I got to hear some insight. And or a couple of the key things were how parents' attitudes about police officers affect their children. So, one thing he in particular told me that him and the police officers that he worked with, they would never, well, not, I shouldn't say never, but they would almost never give someone a speeding ticket who had kids in the back seat.
Hmm.
They said, we just never did it. And I was like, what's different about that?
Yeah.
He goes, because as soon as they drive away, what might they say about the police officer that gave them a ticket?
Mm-hmm.
That MFer, I can't believe he blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Why didn't he blah, blah? And don't they have better things to do? And, you know, go get a donut and, whatever.
Yep.
And he's like, that's just not good for future police officers.
Right. Yeah. And that there's tons of things that you think about, and it goes back to the Micah 6:8, right? To seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Another verse that I actually have tattooed on my arm.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, is because I think that's our goal is that we're big on justice, but at the same time, if we demand a God of justice, then we're all doomed. And thankfully we have a God of mercy, and I think we need to be able to show, and that's one of the biggest problems with um in our own lives is the comparison. And it's like, man, with police too, is we sometimes think it's us versus them, that we're somehow morally better than anyone else, when in reality, the mercy that I've been shown in my life is so great. um and I have to keep that into perspective. And that's, once again, as you're building, you got a kid in the back seat, or you have someone in dire circumstances. um People come from all kinds of different walks of life and different worldviews and different circumstances. And if you don't take the time to consider what's going on in their life, you're not going to be effective as a police officer.
Years ago, I was talking with a guy. St. Louis hasn't exactly been the greatest harmony for racial culture in the world. And this guy was talking about a story from the late 60s, early 70s. And he used to be in the upper end of things in St. Louis. And he says, I got a call from a restaurant owner. And the restaurant owner says, hey, you need to get down here. There's an African American gentleman in my establishment. I need him arrested and removed. He's trespassing.
Wow.
He's like, well, I had to take that call. And at that time, there was some bad stuff going on in the city. Not that there isn't anymore, but back then it was way more out in the open. Like you just
Yeah.
saw things on a regular basis. And so I'm like, this story is going to go a direction that I do not want to hear. Like I
Hmm.
really like this guy, and he's going to tell me something about his police days that is just awful. And instead, he said, so I see the gentleman, he's wearing a suit, he's clearly a businessman, not
Hmm.
causing anybody problems. And the business owner does own his restaurant, and he can choose who he serves and who he doesn't serve. Was this man trespassing? Absolutely. And as a police officer, I had to do something. So what I did was said, hey, man, you got to go. And I don't think this is right. And I'm sorry. However, he can do what he wants to do. There's a really cool restaurant around the corner, and I'd love to buy you some lunch.
I like that.
I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
like that, it was just an amazing story. I'm like, and so in my talking to police officers, whether it was on the shoulder of a road or while we're doing workouts, I found police officers just to be, for the most part, incredibly compassionate, incredibly understanding, and you know, they're truly there to help, to serve, to protect, and understand that today's action affects tomorrow. Um,
Hmm.
so, I hear lots and lots of stories, and it's like there's so much wisdom and incredible, split second decision making that police officers have to make.
Hmm.
Like as a parent, helping our kids, have a good opinion of police officers and have a good understanding. As a police officer, what might you want a kid's view of police officers to be?
That's it. It's kind of why I wrote the kids' books. Is I want, you know, the respect is earned, right? And that's something we have to be sure that we're protecting in the honorable way that we do our job. And so that's important. First of all, I think the biggest responsibility on us is that we're worthy of respect. And so um, it comes back to, once again, is considering everyone's circumstances and not necessarily that we're always right. Um, so I have to throw that caveat in, but I want I want it in the books, to just communicate that I'm a husband, I'm a father, and my deepest desire in doing my job is to glorify God and to make sure others are safe. I believe what I do is a calling, and in that calling, it's never been about a money type thing or a position type thing. It's always been about, I feel an obligation to other people to protect. And I have a strong sense of justice in my own life. And so that's what I was trying to communicate with the kids' books and even the adult book and the social media and everything else is I try to do things with excellence and integrity in everything. So hopefully that would garner a sense of respect in the people that engage in the social media or in the books or um, the way that I've done my job.
When you think about your family, and you can include Mattis in this, uh, and as men, we protect.
Uh-huh.
Are there any things you think about or any ways that you've protected inside of your own family, or maybe an individual story where you remember, I took this situation and transferred the information, whether it was internally for yourself to learn to be better or to pass down to your kids so that they were better prepared on their own when they were in situations and you weren't around?
Yeah, so as a police officer, you see a lot of dark things, and most of the time, I build a hedge around my family that I don't let them into a lot of the things that I have to
Yes,
experience.
right, right.
Every once in a while, I'll give a glimpse if I think it's one that can benefit. And just recently, we had, and it, my kids already knew about it because it was all over the news. But there was 5 students that were in a car going too fast on a road, lost control of the vehicle. I think 2 were high school seniors, 3 were freshmen at Georgia Tech, and excellent students. Um, 3 died,
Mm.
and that car was in our back lot, and so it was nothing gory about the interior of the car, but I just, my boy was asking me about it because he saw it on the news, and so I took a video of the car because I thought it was a good life lesson, right? Is hey, we try to protect you. We ask you to do things. Sometimes it sounds like nagging. You've seen the story. You're trying to process it. There's things that you can learn from this. So every once in a while, I've done that just a few times where I thought it could benefit my kids. Is just kind of peel back that curtain and let you see into a little bit of what we see and why we try to protect you from certain things. And that was one. I was like speed. These guys' potential and future is now gone because of decisions that you know a driver made and just caught up in fun or living in the moment. And so yeah, I think that would be, when you said the protection, a lot of times it is you try to guard things from your family, but that's one in the protection. And I think I've peeled back the hedge just a tad, just to let them see, hey, this is some of the consequences that could come from actions that I don't want you to have to deal with. I'd rather you be able to look at other examples and learn from.
So a couple things I think of when you bring up the driving example is as parents, we may touch our phones while we're driving.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's huge.
And what do our kids see when they're in the
Yep.
back seat?
Right.
So when they turn 15, 16 years old and you say, no phones ever, blah, 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 like, well, for the last 12 years
Yeah.
that I can remember, you've always done that,
Right.
parent. You
Right.
know, most of us didn't have parents that drove around with a cell phone that were touching it because they didn't exist.
Correct.
So we're kind of that first group of people that have to be aware of our behavior. One, is it bad for us anyway? Absolutely. However, when our kids see it, how could they possibly not touch the shiny object while they're driving when they've seen their parents do it all their life?
Right.
So that one's a big one for me. Another one is the statistic of when a teenager is driving and there's a second person in the car,
Hmm.
another teenager. You already know where I'm going with this.
Go ahead.
So the second person in the car increases the likelihood of an accident by 10 or 20% or something.
Hmm.
When the third teenager is introduced into the car, so there's 3 teenagers, the odds of an accident increase like 100, 200, 300%. And the
Hmm.
fourth one and the fifth one increase also, but it's that third one or more that takes the odds of an accident through the roof. So as
Right.
a parent, when there's danger ahead, it's kind of nice to have information like that so you can make these decisions. When your kid says, hey, can I sleep over somewhere? Well, what's my checklist?
Right.
Hey, Johnny can come sleep over here.
Yeah.
I don't want you at that house. You
Right.
might not tell them you don't want them at that house. At some point you disclose, but these things as parents that you do to protect and guide and lead, it's like think through some of this stuff as opposed to being
Mhm.
on autopilot and just letting things happen. So those are a couple things on the driving side where I'm like, hey, your thoughts there?
No, well, one of my common prayers, I think you're right on. One of my common prayers was, with my kids, especially, was give me the wisdom to know the things that I should protect them from, um, and the difference between the things that I have to let them experience. Because I understand that there's going to be certain things that, um, they're not going to learn until they experience. However, there's certain things that I can protect them from. And that's, especially as a parent and someone, you love those kids so much. It's like, okay, I want to protect you from everything. But that's not wisdom. It's I have to let you experience some things to learn from, and knowing the difference between the two. That's, I think, where the biggest learning, and that's why in this circumstance I peeled back, because I think it's such an important lesson. You're 100% right. There's a reason NHTSA, which is NHTSA, it's the safety, it's the National Highway Safety. They put out tra- different statistics on all these accidents, and there's a reason that someone with their permit, or someone in the first year of their license, when it's a class D where I live, is you can't have other people in the car. And that's the exact reason, is because it's not good for your safety. You don't know all those things. And so my kid would get upset. It's like, I'm 10 months out, why can't I have someone driving in the car? And it's like, because 300% chance more likely that you're going to die when you drive. You don't say that. It's just like, well, the law says you can't, right? It's one of those hedges of protection that we have in our lives, just to keep us safe. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's the
that's
teenager's job to ask questions and push the limits and everything
right.
else. And so as parents, we've got to, be ready for those. And if we don't have the answers, go find somebody that has them or, go
Yeah,
look something up or whatever. Last night
absolutely.
we were driving in the city and after a Cardinals game, we got beat badly. And
Uh,
and we pull up to a stoplight. There's one car in front of us. It's a fairly well lit area, although it was a little bit sparse as far as the businesses weren't open. They were closed. There was one spot that was available for lease, so it was an empty, business location. And the car in front of us looked a little okay. And there was a car pulling up behind us. And I just said to my daughter, hey, down the road, you're going to be in a situation like this where you're going to be out. You're going to be in a spot that you're unfamiliar with. Tell me what you see right now.
that's
And
awesome.
she says, well, I see this and I see this and I see this. And I said, something I'm thinking about right now is we're about 20 feet away from the car in front of us.
Hmm.
And here's why. If somebody comes up to our car unexpectedly out of the shadows, I need to be able to go somewhere.
Hmm.
If I'm pulled all the way up to that car, the car behind me may also be pulled all the way up to me and I can't go anywhere and I'm stuck and
Right.
something could go wrong. But right now, even though it looks super safe, and I go, tell me why it looks super safe. And she's like, well, there's people over there and they're just on their phone. They're just chilling, hanging out. Like they don't seem perfect. Everything seems great, right? She goes, yeah. I go, and even then, I'm looking in every mirror. I'm paying attention to everything. I'm observing. And, once that light turns green, I know what we're going to do and where we're going to go. I go, not a big deal. This is a very safe place we're in. However, we still got to be on alert so that we are in a higher crime area also right now. Like, and she's like, okay, Dad, got it. I'm like, cool.
Right. And that's such a good lesson. I remember, very early on in my police career, I went up to a car, and it's what you're talking about, situational awareness. Um, and I went up to a car, and I'm talking to this person, and it's like it's evident. It wouldn't take a police, especially I'm a brand new police officer, so I don't know a lot, but their eyes are glassed over. There's strong smell of alcohol coming from the car, slurring their speech. And, I asked the person, have you had anything to drink? And they're like, no. That I was like, they're lying. I went back and talked to my FTR. I'm like, they're lying to me. right? It blew my mind that someone would lie to a police officer. I'm like, why are they lying like this? Um, and going back to my thing of, letting people experience, and I think situational awareness, and it's something that the Bible teaches, but the heart is deceitful above all things. It's a wellspring of evil, right? Is this, we don't, if we're supposed to be wise as serpents, peaceful as doves, and it's we have to teach our kids that way, is give them the situational awareness. Hey, there's a reason that I'm backed into a spot, or I'm leaving, always beginning with the end in mind and thinking, okay, what's the worst possible scenario that could happen? Because there is evil that's out there, and we're supposed to be wise, be prepared, and act in a godly way. But always have that in mind, is that there's a lot of evil that's around us, and be prepared, um, to take right action.
What
So
happened in that
I'd love that
situation?
you did that with your girl. That's so good.
Did you lock them up and take them away?
Oh yeah, yeah. Why?
Yeah, pretty
Yeah,
pretty easy
please.
call. Yeah, pretty easy call on that one. Like
Yeah.
there's a famous Hall of Fame coach, football coach. He's deceased now, but him and an offensive line coach got pulled over, and the police officer says, "Hey, you guys may have been drinking and blah blah blah. I just want to take you guys home." And the Hall of Fame coach sticks his finger in the police officer's chest and says, "Don't you know who I am?" He says, "I totally do." And he says the guy's name. He says, "You leave us alone, you blah blah blah." And he says, "Please don't do that again. I just really want to give you guys a ride home, and I absolutely don't want to do the paperwork, and I absolutely don't want to arrest you. Please don't do that again. Otherwise, I'm going to have to."
Yeah.
You SOB. He says, "Oh, man." Cuffed him and took him in. It's like how stupid people are. And, when you get onto they were obliterated, like, not two drinks in, they were absolutely hammered. He's like, it stinks when you've got to enforce something even though you don't want to, and
Right.
people force you to do things.
Yep. And that's most situation you get into. The person and the things that they say and do are in control of the whole situation. Really, it's like, there's look, I have solutions for anything that you do. However, I want the most peaceful outcome. Like that's my goal. So the way that you talk, the way that you react, the way that you do things, a lot of time dictates how situations go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you kind of got always have to be paying attention as a person to
Mm-hmm.
where that other person's at, and be aware of your own. I talk about it all the time: respond, not react.
Mm-hmm.
I got pulled over in Tennessee one time outside of Nashville. I wasn't actually speeding, truthfully. There was a construction zone, and there was a sign that said construction zone ends. So I sped up to highway speed, and within a
Uh-huh.
mile, I got pulled over, and I was like, "Dude, man!" But the officer approached the car and he says, "Boy,
Uh-oh.
why are you speeding so fast?" And I went, "Red alert.
Yeah.
This is the problem. I am getting a ticket, and I'm gonna do everything I can not to get arrested. Yes, sir. No, sir. Just write me a ticket. Let me go on my way." Like the best case scenario is this: to get the maximum ticket he's gonna write and drive away, as opposed to get locked up. You know, was I right? I was 100% right. I was not speeding. He was wrong. There was no construction zone. Blah blah blah. However, I'm gonna win that one.
Right. In the moment on the side of the road,
Yeah,
especially
I had
with
three
someone
people
who
with me, but I was
boy.
like, you guys be quiet. Like, say nothing. Like this is going wrong.
And that's some
And
wisdom right there. That's
yeah, yeah. And so you don't necessarily know what had just happened, where he was coming from. That may have been his one stop out of 100. They didn't approach it the way that most police officers would approach it. But, it happens.
yeah.
It happens. So yeah, I had my kids been there with me. I'm like, hey, here's what's going on. And
Another teachable moment.
yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
look for those type things to always be aware and share wisdom,
Yeah.
and be aware that as humans we can tend to react with anger, and we want to be right. You've talked already about humility, and uh, when the ego gets in the way,
Hmm.
Oh my goodness, things can go so wrong. So we've got to be aware of our own ego and when we're trying to be right so that we can lose the war.
Yeah, and other people's ego too, right? And that's
Yes,
what you
yes.
dealt with in that situation. Is you're like, okay, the boy. It's like, okay, I could argue this and I'd be 100% right, but at the same time, all the outcome is not going to be what I want. My uncle, who was very influential in my life, a man, a godly man, extremely successful, extremely generous. But he taught me one of the biggest, and I think it comes up in the book too, is that intelligent people understand how to communicate to others. And you don't fully grasp that. And the way that it gets into the dog world is you're supposed to be the smart one. I'm supposed to interpret what this dog is trying to tell me. But what you did in that situation was you're like, okay, I know some things from the sentence he told me when he approached, and this is the best way to handle it, as opposed to, I want to be right.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was determined to be right, I'd have been in jail that night.
Yeah. Well, and the wiser, you're playing chess. The wiser move too is, okay. Well, if I really want to fight it, just go to court, and I can say, hey, look, here's a picture of the sign. That's why I sped up. This is the speed that I was going, unless he can prove otherwise. So yeah, but being able to understand the situation that you're like that's true intelligence, and the way that you're able to communicate the outcome that you're trying to get, or closest to that.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience that maybe we haven't touched on? And then, of course, we'll get into how to connect with the book and connect with you and everything else. But
Yeah, like I said, the two things that I didn't get into the second thing that I want people to take away. The one is the lens of which you see the world, that you'd be able to look at your own world and see the amazing things that God's trying to teach you. I did it with my dog, and he has been a great example of how God works through creation for me. Um, but the second thing too is, and this is more superficial, but if you could come away with a fascination of what these dogs do, because that's what I really fell in love with, was being able to see the capabilities of a working dog. It's just incredible to me. And that's why I like the TV show that we went on. I thought it was so much fun. These stupid obstacles and things, but it was all stuff that my dog just figured out intuitively because of the connection that we had. So that's the other thing that I wanted people to take away. So if I could narrow it down to two things, man, look at your own world with the same lens and see the amazing things that God's doing. And then two, dogs are pretty cool.
100%. So I love that you brought that up. So, how you look at the world affects what you see. So, when you
Huh.
put on the biblical lens that you look through, the Christ like lens that you look through, when somebody doesn't treat you mercifully,
Mm-hmm.
you can afford them grace. You can
Mm-hmm.
forgive them. And, like, well, I didn't win. I wasn't right. I blah, blah, blah. Well, you did, because you didn't harbor that anger, that resentment, that seed of bitterness didn't grow and turn you into a bitter person. Or, you know, it's much better when you just forgive and move on as opposed to allow that to root and grow. So that Christ like lens really does benefit you, even though you might feel like, oh, I lost in this moment. Well, no, you like think bigger picture, think biblical lens, think connection, think all the additional benefits you get. As guys, sometimes we like to fight about things. We like to be right about things. We like to have ego
Mm-hmm.
about something. And it's like, look at Christ and look at his example of his ego or
Mm-hmm.
humility, or when he stood up for something and when he
Right.
chose to have mercy and let something sort of pass, but direct things. So, um, yeah, so that I love that you brought that up. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, as you're seeing things through your dog, and I've got a follow-up question, but how do you hear from God? So this is probably the most common question that I get overall, is
Mm-hmm.
something around how do you hear from God?
Yeah, and there's, I think, multiple ways. One is scripture, right? Is he's written it down for us, is that you pick up his word, and you can, that's one way he communicates, through prayer. um just spending time in prayer, and um obviously God gives answers that's the time that we get to relate with the God of the universe. Wise counsel has been another one in my life. Just hearing from other godly men and women, seeing the example that they live. My sister's been a big one in my life. That's always been a great example, and given me some great counsel. Creation is another, right? The lessons that I've learned, but it has to be through the filter of those others first, right? As you can't just like look at things and try to interpret it for yourself, but with the framework of scripture and godly counsel and prayer. I think it gives you, that's the way that God speaks to us.
So when you hear something specifically, individually,
Mm-hmm.
how do you hear it?
Mm, I've never heard like an audible voice except for that's a funny story. When I accepted quick when I was in the Marine Corps, I accepted Jesus, and I'm praying the sinner's prayer. Finally got it in my life. That I read 1 John 2:6, and it says, "If anyone would come after me, he must walk as Jesus did, or come after him, he must walk as Jesus did." I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I just broke down. I'm surrendering my life, and I start hearing what I thought was the like angels singing. It was my roommate's headphones fell off, and it was Neil Diamond. Anyway, they're singing "Coming to America." I'm like, why would this angel come into America? But okay, that's not what you're talking about. I've never heard the audible voice of God because it's not Neil Diamond. And, but
That's awesome.
yeah, when I hear it, it's through that. It's the godly counsel, and like it's there's been times in my life where it's just no doubt that it matches up with scripture. Um, Usually it's my wife is on board, right? If like there's been certain times in my life where I've had opportunity to get back into ministry, my wife hasn't been on board. I moved her. We were in full-time ministry for 10 years. She was born and raised in California, and I said, hey, I want to change my vocation completely, and I want you to move across country with me, to a place that you've never been. And she was like, yeah. That was a confirmation for me, right? Is that God put this godly woman in my life, and the fact that I'm spur of the moment, let's do this, but this intelligent, prudent, godly lady that I'm married to, when she gives me confirmation, I listen. And there's been other times in my life, like I said, now, police officer, I'm like, I want to get out of this for whatever reason, and she's like, I don't feel like that's what God wants. And I prayed more about it. I'm like, wow, I agree. So I I think your spouse is a huge one, that your team, and that has to be on board. So that's kind of the way that I process it, is especially the scriptures, the first lens that I look through, then counsel and my wife.
Yes, yeah, yeah, 100%. So it doesn't always have to be a voice from God,
Right.
where at the same time, sometimes like a scripture verse pops out as you're
Mm,
going through your filter, like boom, that's
right.
it. Or um, like I find repetitive signs, like
Oh yeah.
everything you're saying, and then I'm like, I was talking with Gary Thomas, who wrote Sacred Marriage, the other day, and I go back. He starts talking about Second Colossians, and I go back to my Bible that I've got my pen in at the last place I was reading, and I open my Bible. I'm like, I'll be darned if I wasn't reading Second Colossians, and he
Second
brought that out.
Colossians.
And
Did I miss that one?
what's that?
Corinthians, maybe?
Yeah. All right.
Because I'm like,
Well, I
wait, there's
gotta
only
go.
one
I gotta look.
Colossians, right? Am
Yeah, I gotta go. I gotta go look actually.
You
But
threw me for a loop. I'm like,
yeah,
wait.
what he was talking about, I went right to my Bible and it was right there.
Oh, nice. I love it.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is crazy how that was maybe the next uh verse after where I had stopped.
That's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's all these different confirmations and stuff of these thoughts. He spoke specifically. He's like, when you hear the voice of God, like reference it back to scripture.
Yes.
If you think you're hearing it, maybe it is.
Right.
Maybe it's somebody else.
Yeah, I try to do it with like cars when I want to buy a new car. I'm like, okay, if I see, I see a red F-150, I know I'm supposed to get an F-150. And it's like, what? Then you
Yeah.
see all the red F-150s, and you're like,
All of a
"Whoa,
sudden
oh
everywhere with
God!"
cars. Yeah.
And my wife says no. I'm like, "Oh, that was just me. I got it. I got it."
Yep, yep, absolutely, absolutely. So how can people connect with you, get your books,
Yeah,
tell us about connecting with you.
books anywhere that you get your books. They're Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Christian Books, all those avenues. Also, there's the Audible that's out there, which I read in my voice, that was a lot of fun. It was an interesting process, and I absolutely loved it. And I'd recommend, if you get a chance, to listen to the Audible, because you get to hear some my emotion caught up in the stories. So that's one way. And then my dog Mattis.com is kind of our website, and it'll steer you wherever you want to go if you want to find us on socials and stuff.
Perfect. That sounds great. Yeah, there's certain books that I've listened to and read, read paperback. And I'm like,
Yeah,
man, if you're gonna read this one, like definitely go Audible.
yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
go Audible because
Do
various
both if you want.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. It's sometimes it's the voice, sometimes it's the extra inserts into the audibles, whatever it is, but sometimes the audible version like makes a huge difference
Yeah.
with how you experience it. But I've enjoyed the paper version.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it.
So yeah, I highly encourage that. And then the kids books also out there, like what a cool way to bridge the gap with your kids and get into conversations and have fun with them. And these books are so good. And you've got over 2,000 Amazon reviews on one of them. So there's some there's some social proof right there for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So before we end, I always ask our guests, can you throw out a challenge for the guys to do week to week? So something that might be easier, it might be a little more challenging, but something that they can do where they can become a better dad, better husband, better protector, better leader, better fitness, whatever it might be that you're like, this would be a cool thing for guys to do.
Yeah, man, just talking to you, I love the way that you took advantage of every circumstance, to make it a teachable moment. And then that's what I've tried to do as a dad, is look for those teachable moments. And not that I've always succeeded either. I've fallen flat a lot as a dad, but it's always look for those times where you can leave the most important legacy, which is a relationship with Jesus. So I really thank you for that. And this time together is just hearing that from you, because it's something I'm trying to be intentional about in my life with my kids, is that I take advantage and I look for those opportunities, um, to let them peek into my brain. And this is why I'm 20 feet behind a car. Right? That's incredible. I love that example. But yeah, take advantage of those situations with your kids. Don't always just try to be their friend, but try to be the parent that we're supposed to be, and a godly example, and in those moments.
Yeah, so if you're in Alpharetta, Georgia, another way to contact them is pull up next to the canine truck.
Not anymore. He's retired.
Oh,
So
no way.
yeah, he's retired.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
No
gosh.
dog anymore.
Oh no. Oh
Yeah, I miss
no.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good that he's still around and ah.
You'll meet another fine officer, I'm sure, if you do that though.
Oh, that's great. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. Love the
Pleasure.
challenge. Share those teachable moments with your kids. Pay a special attention this coming week. And, God bless you. And thanks for sharing the message. I love having other like guy believers that have a masculine way about them that are unabashedly Christian and unabashedly masculine. And, uh, what more than a Marine? Police officer, canine patrol. We
And
need more.
TikToker.
And TikToker. Yes, yes. Oh, well, thank you so much. God bless you guys for
Thank you.
listening. Share this episode with your buddies. Share this episode with your kids for that matter. This one's a fun one. So thank you so much, Mark, for coming on.
I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you very much.
You bet.
All right. See you, sir.